After months of hard work and training, I finally had my instrument check ride. And wouldn't you know it, the FAA showed up. I went into my instrument check ride nervous but confident. A few days before the check ride, the designated pilot examiner called me to shore up some details. At the end of our call, though, he said, there's always a chance an FAA representative could tag along and grade my check ride. So make sure you account for that in the weight and balance. And this really caught my attention, and it made me think that the DPE knew that he was due for an FAA check. Sure enough, the day of the check ride arrives, and the DPE shows up and says, "We've got to wait for the FAA guy to arrive before we can start." And that's when I knew this is really happening. Everyone always worries that an FAA ride-along check ride is going to be a lot more strict than a normal one. Well, I'm here to tell you that sounds about right. When the FAA guy arrived, we had brief introductions, we did the logbook and the paperwork stuff, and then we got down to starting the oral. And for this whole time, he basically just sat in the back of the room and listened. I can't imagine that this is his favorite part of the job. I only have my private pilot check ride to compare it to, but I have to say that this oral felt strenuous. I felt up to the task though, and after about 2 hours of oral, the DPE said, "We're ready to fly." Both guys watched me pre-flight the airplane, and we loaded in and worked out the headsets and seating arrangement. The DPE sat to my right, and the FAA guy was in the back. I conducted the passenger briefing to end all passenger briefings, really a platinum plus passenger briefing, and then we took off. And as with the oral, during the practical flight portion, the FAA representative just sat back and observed. He really didn't say much. A couple times he spoke up, but not about elements of the check ride, but more about things with the headsets and the plane configuration. Now first, a disclaimer that all DPEs are different, and this may or may not relate to FAA participation in my check ride, but I definitely felt like in my private pilot check ride, the DPE helped me relax and be at ease with little comments like, "Hey, let's go and have a fun flight, and I'm sure this is going to be great." And I frankly, during my instrument check ride, got none of that. And sure, I'm not a student pilot any longer, and we shouldn't need morale boosts, but I just thought it was interesting and a stark difference to what I saw between the two check rides. We got the practical exam underway, and it was going pretty well. We took off, and I did a really solid RNAV approach to a mist and into a VOR hold, and everything was going very smoothly. I departed the hold on a specific VOR radial and went out to do some unusual attitudes, and then turned back inbound to do another hold at the VOR, setting up for a VOR approach. And this is where things kind of started to break down. We went partial panel for the VOR approach. No MFD, backup altimeter and airspeed indicator, no autopilot. The DPE failed the instruments when I was coming up on the VOR final approach fix, and I adjusted my scan and continued with the approach. I was paying very precise attention to the green needles and the backup VSI, and I was trying really hard to nail this approach. But at one point, after approach passed me over to tower, I hear the tower call up and say, "6 Delta Mike, are you on frequency?" In my fixation on the approach path, I had neglected to call up tower after I switched frequencies. I was angry at myself, but I continued on with the approach and the check ride. We went missed, did another RNAV to a circling approach, and then we landed. As we get out of the plane, the DPE says he and the FAA guy need to talk for a little, so I go inside back to the classroom and I wait. And I sit there thinking, I don't know if I've passed or failed. I know I could have done better. And I waited for 30 minutes for the DPE to come in and sit down with his assessment. At this point, the FAA guy has left because I never saw him again after that. So we sit for the assessment, and out of his mouth come the words, "Did not meet ACS standards." I didn't pass my check ride. We came back a week later for the recheck, and in case you're wondering, the FAA does not tag along on the recheck. The DPE and I had a great flight. It was a short one. We did an RNAV to a circling approach, and I made sure to call up tower this time. And the mood felt more relaxed, more at ease, but that might have just been me knowing exactly what I had to do to finish and being very confident that I could do it. So how did having the FAA there change my check ride? Well, it's hard to say for just my one case, but if I had to guess, I would say it changed the tone of the ride most of all. certainly felt more formal. And I think I may have been graded a little tougher than usual, but of course that's impossible to prove. The fact that I wasn't told right away that I hadn't met ACS standards, and the fact that the DPE and the FAA guy were talking for so long after the check ride left me wondering. The ACS is meant to be an objective guidebook, but the truth is that there's still tons of subjectivity in how different examiners apply and interpret what they see. What really matters is I had the chance to get some practice and then conduct a great recheck a week later. And so now I'm an instrument-rated pilot, and one that will forever, always, when doing an approach, have a voice in my head asking, "Did you call the tower?"